Hello, my name is Taj, and these are my only Bionicle figures, my revamps for the LEGO Bionicle Generation 2 Toa Masters, aka the Toa Akoto. And we're going to start things off with Tahu. And I actually don't have the original Toa Masters to compare these to, so the footage that you're seeing right now is from LJ's recent reviews on the TTV channel. I will have his playlist linked in the description, but I'm just kind of using this to show off kind of issues I have with the original figure. I'm personally not a very big fan of the original Tahu Master. I think the leg armor looks a little too bulky. I don't really like the silver hands and feet. I think they just look kind of out of place. And an issue that a good chunk of the Toa have are these open ball joints on the fronts of the torsos, because LEGO decided to not make a new torso design when designing something for the new gearbox. So I built a custom torso design for each of the Toa Masters. 4 of them use different variations on what I'm about to show off. And I'm just going to pop off the chest plate so you can see how that's built. It's fairly simple, and I think it's the job just fine, and I think it definitely gives a much more finished look compared to the original. I'm fairly happy with this custom upper leg design. It's designed in a way so that red ball joint won't bend, and it adds some extra height without needing to cut up the color scheme with a bunch of these, because unfortunately LEGO only released these in dark gray. I decided to incorporate black into the color scheme, which allowed me to use these Firelord Lava Cracked armor, which I think looks pretty fantastic. And this thing's torso design is, of course, designed around the gearbox, so it's got that. And it's got less friction than the original, because LEGO kind of went a bit overboard with friction on the original Toa Masters. And these are significantly easier to move, and they can still hold a pose just fine. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Tahu Master of Fire. Next up is Kopaka, Master of Ice. Now, the original is probably the best of the Toa Masters. In my opinion, its only real issue is this gap in its legs right here, but that can easily be ignored. Of course, I swapped the torso out with one fairly similar to Tahu's. And yeah, I know you can see that red ball joint, but we're just gonna pretend it's not there because my black one hasn't come in time. I decided to completely bulk up the shield, and I think it kind of helps give this thing more of a tanky paladin look that I feel like the original was kind of going for. I decided to swap the spear tip out for the Toa Mata sword, which I think looks pretty good, and of course it's got the gear function so it can swing it pretty well. I gave him a custom lower leg design that I like quite a bit, and I especially like how you can kind of see the transparent bone through the gaps in the piece. I think it just kind of gives a more lively look to him. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Kopaka. Next up is Onua, Master of Earth. Now, the build for this thing is based more off of Onua Uniter as opposed to Master, because I think Onua Uniter is probably my favorite G2 set. The weird proportions on Onua Master were just something that I really didn't feel like trying to translate over, because I just think they stick out too much and I think they look too weird. I think it's that chest plate giving him weird ape-like proportions that make me not like him that much. But anyway, on to my figure. I went and gave him a Uniter torso because this hammer was a two-handed weapon anyway and would probably be too heavy for a gearbox. And it's not even that complicated of a Uniter build. But yeah, the gear function is in the waist, so you can turn it and he'll just swing his hammer around, and I think that looks pretty organic. I think that's something that the original Onua Uniter did pretty well. But I did decide to go for these large shoulder pads next to his head as kind of an homage to Master, because Master did have those really large shoulder pads, and I think they look pretty good. I really like the way the legs turned out with this kind of jagged purple armor used on Speed of Demon's bike, and then that crystal armor, and then I used that ribcage chest plate, which kind of gives a kind of crystallized look, so it looks like he's using crystal-like armor. And I kind of went all out with the hammer. I think it turned out pretty good looking. It definitely looks like it'll do a lot of damage if this guy just decides he wants to beat you with it. But it's also really not that heavy. Like, you can hold it just fine, but the reason I didn't give him the arm gearbox is because his elbow would just flop around with the hammer. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Onua Master. Next up is Liwa, Master of Jungle. So the original Liwa is a pretty good set that I don't really have any major complaints about, except maybe the yellow, which I swapped out for gold. So yeah, let me just get this out of the way. Liwa, Pahatu, and Gali also have gold integrated into their color schemes, which I know a lot of people aren't very keen on Tahu, Kopaka, and Onua having gold, but they all came with the gold masks, and it's kind of a Bionicle Stars thing with the golden Tahu armor, so I just decided to integrate gold into all their color schemes. Liwa, like Tahu and Kopaka, have that custom torso design, but this one uses a hand as a hip, and it provides just a little bit of articulation, just a little bit of extra posability. I'm also pretty happy with the way that these legs turned out. It's a pretty simple design, but I think it looks pretty good. Of course, he's got the gear function, because that's what this torso is built around. And the reason I have the axle right here is because I decided to keep the secondary function of the original figure by turning his axes into gliders that just attach to his arms. And I think that turned out pretty good looking. I didn't keep the katanas from the original, but it's not like it really matters because he has blades attached to his arms, so he can just punch stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Liwa. Next up we have Gali, Master of Water. So the original Gali Master is my second favorite, with Kopaka taking the slight edge. My only real issue with it, apart from the torso ball joints, is the fact that the weapon is just too unwieldy, because the CCBS bones just are not built to maintain that kind of weight, so her elbow just kind of flops around, as well as the fact that the gearbox actually does not have enough friction to maintain it. So I decided to replace the oversized axe with these Chima blades, and I think they turn out pretty good looking, and they're light enough so that the gearbox can actually hold a pose with them. And I also added a spear in there, so this is a trident again. And on the bottom I just put one of these Speed of Demon blades because I thought it looked good. She is using a similar torso design to Tahu, Kopaka, and Liwa. I decided to cut the transparent light blue out of her color scheme because I wanted that to be a color exclusive to ice characters, so she has the transparent dark blue, which I think looks pretty good, and it's the same color used for her Tuamata mask, as well as that limited edition mask that will cost you like $5 grand. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Gali. And finally, we have Pahatu, Master of Stone. Now, the original, in my humble opinion, is a pretty bad set. This set has nothing that really stands out as particularly well done or interesting. It's just the most bland of these builds, and it's a bland CCBS build with the Toa Master gearbox just kind of slapped on. So I had to turn to his Uniter form for a little bit of inspiration for anything, which led me to use the Dark Tan. which I think turned out pretty well, and it gave me an opportunity to use the cloth piece that came on the Force Awakens Rey CCBS set, which I think looks pretty good, gives him kind of a desert nomad look. Of course, I decided to maintain the gear function like the original, except I put it in both arms because he's got dual weapons, not just one. And the torso design is actually kind of unique because it's not using the same thing I've been using before. It's in fact using a 2016 Star Wars torso, which people don't really use that often, but I think it looks pretty good. I think this is the one that came with Finn. I decided to keep the asymmetry on the arms, except not make it as severe, I guess. So his right arm is essentially just kind of like a armored up bashing arm, and I put some golden spikes on his arm and the legs, and I'm pretty happy with the way those turned out. And I've got some pieces on the bottom so I can maintain the function of the original, where you can put his boomerangs on his feet to make, I guess, sand shoes. And then now he's got two daggers, which I decided to place on his hips, just because I had the space to put them there. And now he's got his sand shoes and daggers, and now you can dual wield them and use them both at the same time. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Pahatu. And that's going to be it for the Toa Masters. So if you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like and a comment down below. And if you haven't already, then subscribe for that Hero Factory content, because I'm not going to be making more Bionicle videos. I only made this video because I had these guys laying around. Until then, take care.